Okay, I'm new to Zoom, so hopefully this works out well. So I really just want to say, thank you guys all for being here. We all have different perspectives, and a lot of what land design has to do with is perception, so we each come with different thoughts. We each come with a different perception. And that's, as Anastasia says in some of the books, somebody's kin's domain is going to reflect their qualities of their spirit. So how they design that is going to really show, who they are. So there's no right or wrong way. I think that the point of this call is to just kind of brainstorm and talk about ideas, share ideas. Maybe we find some common ground. Maybe we don't. Maybe people are like, I really believe strongly in this, and somebody's like this. And I think it's important to give each other space with that, because we all have, that creative drive, and we all need to stay true to that for sure. Not listen to somebody else's dogma. So my thing is just thank you guys all for being here, for the work you've done to get here, because I know we've all had some challenges, especially this past year. So thank you guys all for being here. The purpose of this call for me would be, like I said, exchanging ideas. If anybody has any specific things they want to talk about right away, we can do that. Living fences, maybe it's fruit trees, maybe it's gardens, what is permaculture? Megan Peterson, you're walking around in a beautiful jungle. I just want to say that looks really awesome. You look like you're in a paradise.
Thank you. This is my little piece of heaven over here.
Are you located in like Hawaii?
I am. I'm on the Big Island.
Wow. That's so cool. There's so many of our community that are in Hawaii.
It's a good place to be and live, a wonderful lifestyle, and there's still land, on Big Island. So
yeah. I've heard, is there no controversy over like natives and the natives and the people moving in? I'm like an outsider. I have no idea.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. It is a topic, but from my experience, my husband grew up here. I'm from California originally, but as long as you come here with like love and aloha and respect, it's like, come over, be part of this community, bring whatever, good energy. It's a very spiritual community, so, and in reading the books, so much of it is connected to what like Hawaiian culture is based on, so anyway, I could go really deep into it, but we're all trying to find that spot. I found it here. Like even the dance of hula, you're mimicking nature. I mean, how cool is that? You're not just dancing, you're like, I'm appreciating connecting with nature. How cool is that? Anyway.
Right. No, I remember when I was a kid, my dad had me read the 7 Principles of Huna. And that's like the Hawaiian Islands. I don't know if there's a subset of cultures, but yeah, I'm fascinated by that culture. I'm still really wanting to travel down that way. I've not been yet.
Well, we're trying to start a little community here, but that's my intention. So
yeah, I am not finding the person's name in my brain right now, but we have a member who I just remember on the last community call, she was saying like, hey, or it was on the Telegram, I think.
Natasha.
Yeah.
We connected.
Oh, okay.
I haven't met her, but just, we contacted each other. I think she's on another part of the island, but
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, well, there's so many people, and tying that back to like gardening and things. Hawaii has really become notable for Korean natural farming. Which, does anyone here know about KNF, Korean natural farming? Mm-hmm. Something you should definitely look into. Save you all types of money. The term would be like IMOs. So that's what Korean natural farming is really into. And there's a really cool documentary if you look up Korean natural farming on YouTube, and it's on, it's probably about 12 minutes or something like that. And they really show you how they do this process. So they don't buy fertilizer. That's the big thing with like organic agriculture and how people are wanting to grow organic these days. And it's like, well, you got to still go to the store and buy kelp, or you got to buy all these different things. And it's, in reality, that's not sustainable. What are we going to do on a kin's domain? Are we going to continue to go to the city every week, to get our amendments to grow all of our food? So long story short, Korean natural farming works with harvesting your own fertilizers from the land. And it's really something that's been going on for thousands of years. There's a great book. It's called Jadam, Jadam. Jadam Farming. If you look it up, it's an orange cover. Highly recommend that read. This is anything from how to make organic pesticides, organic fertilizers, specific fertilizers, fertilizers for fruiting trees, specific for certain stages. It gets really in depth, but there's also really simple, basic methods. The commonest method is you get a bucket full of dirt, put it in a nylon sack, you cook a bag of potatoes, put that in a nylon sack, put that in a gallon of water with a cup of salt, let that sit for a day, boom, you just made the best microorganism tea that your soil could possibly get. They've taken like before and after pictures of applying that, and it's amazing. You can turn clay into tilth, So it's definitely something to look into, especially if you are trying to regenerate your soil. If you are living in a place with horrible soil, rocky soil, clay, sand even, you can really add a lot of organic matter that way. But yeah, so Hawaii is on my place to go. Definitely. Does anybody? No, go ahead.
What do you know about no-till method?
It's that, what I know is when I take a walk in the woods, there's nothing being tilled, and it's, you dip your hand down in it and it's gold. So I think the thing is, like, when you walk into a farmer field, like, we have to realize there's nothing like that in nature. So for the production, I understand and getting that soft, loamy soil, but really the no-till is the way to go in the future. I think lightly digging in certain areas doesn't hurt. And you can also do things like surface till, most of the time when we think of tilling, it's like you're letting the machine go down, 6, 7, 8 inches. You can do a light till on the surface, and that doesn't harm. What happens when you till is basically you expose all your living beings in the soil to oxygen, and it basically ramps up their production like they're on cocaine, and then they burn themselves out, and then they're dead. And so then you've just robbed your soil of everything. Not only that, but you've opened up all the pores in the soil. And so think about, like, all of these minerals and gases just start rising from the soil. So as much as you can keep it covered, keep all that good nutrition in there. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, and I've looked into it quite a bit, and we've tried it in our garden, and I have no idea how anybody's able to do it. Because what do you do? Like, you start off, here's land and it's covered in weeds or, grasses,
Right,
natural grasses and all. And even if you just plant your stuff, like, what do you do with the rest of the grass? It covers, it covers. So maybe you like mow it all, or like, what do you do?
Yeah, I wish Zoom, and I'm sure they do, I wish they had a feature where there was like a whiteboard that you could draw, because it's so easy to just, like, once you see it and you get it. But the biggest thing is if you heard of lasagna gardening, has anyone here heard of lasagna gardening? So that principle is one that you would take into that. So if you're starting from a bare site and you got native grasses and you're like, this section here is going to be my garden and I need it to be all soil, the first thing that you want to do is layer cardboard, or you want to layer some sort of decomposing material. I've heard people use wool rugs. I wouldn't suggest that. That doesn't really sound very natural. I think cardboard is something we have a surplus of. We can use that. The only toxic thing that could be in there is if you get the plastic coating on the top, or you get the very colorful inks that can leach into the soil. But yeah, cardboard, and then you're just building up from there. And
right, but the question is to build, right? And so I have soil, and the soil is all right. It's pretty heavy clay, but still it's very productive because I can see the grasses just love it.
Yeah.
So then, in my garden, it's kind of maybe big, but it's big. So I can cover it. I can find cardboard to cover it, but then I have to come up with the soil to put on top. And that's the problem for me,
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean,
the layers.
Yeah, I guess for me, like, it's, if anybody has any horse people around them, I mean, those are your new best friends. They have got, now you don't want to use even maybe 2-year-old stuff, but you want to go in the 4-year-old piles that looks like dirt. it shouldn't be hot at all. And you can use that as soil. That's all my beds are. And my plants, my plants love it. You have to be careful if you're going to add woody material. I made that mistake, and it hogs nitrogen. And so your plants end up
Fresh
yeah.
wood, right?
Yeah. And on top, you don't ever want to put wood, mix that with your soil. But yeah, there's so many different solutions. Some people say, just to take a year and grow a bunch of different cover crops, crops that'll go over the surface, and then just cut those all down and use those as straw to keep your weeds down.
Yeah, we've tried that. And
Listen, there's so many, in your climate's different, it's like we all figure out what's going on in Hawaii is going to be so different than what's going on here. I mean, they're working with a growing season all year round practically. Yeah, which I'm kind of envious of. We can here a little bit. I can get greens to grow through the year, but that cold snap just, it doesn't really do it all good here.
So here's my experience with no-till garden. Okay, we give up when we start tilling because I tried the straw, and the straw works for maybe about 2 months, and then the weeds are stronger, and they just literally lift it up. And I found it problematic to do the lasagna simply for the resources reason. And I do have good stuff underneath. I wanted to. I didn't want that there was too much of an input on my end, like from my experience.
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing with permaculture is, I have something, if we get to it or where anybody's interested, the principles of permaculture, and that talks a lot about, what can we do that's really the least work that achieves the maximum result. And in certain climates, it's easier than others. Hawaii, you're just a superstar of growing and doing everything gardening. It's really easy to build stuff there. Things grow and decompose with the temperature. Here, it's a little bit different. We're working with this set time frame. So, yeah, I've experienced that as well, because I've done actually mulch on top, wood mulch. And yeah,
I was just gonna mention it.
Yeah, and it goes right through. And I think there's not to throw in a philosophical quote into a practical conversation, but weeds do bring up supplemental information. So grasses will take moisture, but weeds, if you look at them, actually perform a certain function. A lot of the times they'll bring up. I'm trying to think of a couple of ones right now that I know for sure. And,
well, nettle.
Yeah, nettle brings up iron. I know that for sure. And dandelion,
nitrogen fixers.
Yeah, and then like the more pests that we in our yards, weeds, dandelions, chicories, those all provide vital nutrients. A lot of the times the macronutrients, the little ones that you can't even go buy in a store. You can't go buy boron or things like that, but your plant needs it. It needs the whole periodic table. So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things, like we all have to kind of like work with what we're given.
I have a garden that it's a perennial garden, and it's in Massachusetts. So it's like zone 6B. But I have a lot of similar frustrations to yours about the weeds, because it's in a suburban area. I can only work on it I don't live there, so I have to go and visit it. So it only gets occasional work done. And a few things I figured out. So if you have, this strategy obviously requires like a few years to at least maybe you could speed run it in a year. But the strategy is, adding, if you can wait a year for your actual garden that you want growing things. And I think doing this in a year would be tough, but you probably could. But a fast growing mulch producing biomass producing plant like comfrey, and there are places where you can get the comfrey that doesn't go to seed. So that can be a problem with comfrey, but if you get the comfrey that doesn't go to seed, it's a lot easier to control. but
I was
comfrey,
gonna ask, how do you kill it once you establish it?
yeah, well, you're choosing, well, you don't, I'm not saying plant it all over your garden, but rather plant it in, so what, to actually plant it, once you get a bunch of comfrey plants, you know, you don't have to do, you know, it's a little, you just basically dig the hole to put it in about twice as big as the pot that you're taking it out of or whatever. But it's not any, so each clump of comfrey can be like, you can just, if you have like a big, say you have a big field full of weeds, you know, dig a little hole here and then, you know, X feet over here, dig another hole here, put a comfrey. So you're really not, you don't have to do a lot of tilling for that part to get the comfrey
Right.
planted, right? Just
Right.
little holes everywhere. But then the comfrey quickly becomes a big bush full of biomass. And I've noticed that, you know, you can harvest it and it comes back very quickly. Once you have a bunch of those all over your landscape. Now, the thing is you need enough of those because you need a bunch of those plants. And
Mhm.
another good one, I noticed, are you in a roughly temperate region?
I'm in 5.
Yeah, you said
It's like
Missouri.
it's like we're
What
on
about
5.
Navi?
Yeah, we're like on 5B 6A. It's like literally if you go north 10 miles, they say you're in 6A, or sorry, south 10 miles, you're in 6A. So I'm about there.
Yeah, so burdock is
Yeah.
a great one. Now that is seedy and will take over, but it's not like impossible to keep it from taking over really, because the seeds, when they're just hanging out there for a long time before they actually fall to the ground, and they're
Right.
big when they
Right.
hang out.
Yeah,
So
burdock. I did not know that burdock you can use as what is it? Is it fixes nutrients within itself
it's
too?
pretty
Because it's a
fast
biennial.
growing. Well, it's probably does, I don't know, nutrient wise, I'm sure it does something because it's
Yeah,
got
and
deep roots.
any of those plants that have deep roots are like, burdock has a deep root, comfrey has that tap root. They're gonna, I mean, you look at the structure of a plant and you can kind of like tell what its function is. They definitely bring up nutrients for sure.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and but for me, even just the mulch it produces is it's worth planting just for that reason alone. Because then what I do is, so I'm like you, I find it hard to find enough layers to do the lasagna because of where the garden is. It's just in the suburbs, and and calling like tree companies and stuff. I've tried that, but it's hard. And on top of it, it's my parents who actually own the place where the garden is, and my dad really, for some reason, the idea of like taking other people's yard waste and using it in our garden, he just doesn't like that. So I have to grow all the mulch that I get on the land, because I could go to the dump and I could find people's bags of grass, but he doesn't let me do that.
Right.
That's not allowed. So I have to come up with everything. So it took me a few years. Now, if I had known what I was doing at the beginning, I would have just bought a shitload of comfrey and planted it everywhere. Not everywhere, but like basically like take over like 20% of the land with those things that produce tons of leaves and quickly. And then you're harvesting that a few times a year. And when you do, you can mix it with, like, if you get wood chip mulch or some
Yeah.
kind of mulch that's not really enough on its own, but mixed in with all those leaves, that's a nice layer.
Right.
And you end up, my problem, actually, you mentioned about the wood chips being a tricky thing. And a lot of the time wood chips are the only thing I can get for mulch. And actually, when I made that garden, I started out with kind of a big, like a big massive sheet mulching project, but really I used like a lot of wood chips throughout that whole sheet mulch. So I'm wondering, what bad stuff did I do to my soil? It seems pretty productive since then. I mean, this is about 7 years ago, so it's been
Oh,
decaying for a long
yeah.
time.
Yeah, you're fine then. So, I did the same thing. I did a huge sheet mulch, but where I messed up is I did a layer of wood and then I had soil on top of that. And so what that does is it robs your nitrogen in the soil, we were saying earlier. But yeah, I think wood chips are actually, they're the way to go. And the reason why is that for these perennial systems, you're going to want a more fungally based soil, and wood chips have more fungal connections they attract that microbe, and the microbes already present within them. So oddly, in vegetable gardening, we want a more acidic soil. because we're growing annuals, and annuals like the more acidic bacterial dominant soil. But with perennial, woody perennials, fruit trees, they all like that fungal. So, you know, the big thing with wood chips is time. And if you got time, then there's no, you know, you can let that sit and it's fine. So if you, you know, that's why like spreading huge, thick layers of wood chips around your fruit trees is awesome. They'll love it. I mean, they'll thank you for it, especially if you can do this research on your own, but there's certain wood chips for certain trees and there's a certain time to apply them. And it all has to do with the root system. But I think the comfrey thing is a good idea for a lot of people to try. And I think there's other solutions too that can stack different functions, you know, so comfrey is a great mineral accumulator, but think about, you know, like if say your land was lacking nitrogen, you know, you could grow a legume, you know, like Nadia was saying, you could grow bird's foot trefoil is a really nice one. Hairy vetch is very pretty, you know, so maybe you really like that pretty. Buckwheat and things like that will give you fast biomass. You know, it kind of just depends on what your situation is. I think for you, what it sounds like is, you know, you're doing like a perennial forest, food forest kind of sounds like,
Yeah,
right?
and I also, it had to be like partial shade, so that rules out other things that might be biomass heavy, but it also, those work in particular for the situation Nadia's saying, where what you're starting with already, it's like there's no bare soil, it's already covered in weeds. And the reason is that it works well is because like if you get a plant like comfrey, where to plant say 20 comfrey plants does not require you to, you know, do some massive
Right.
removal.
Well,
It's just
and
little holes. But
yeah,
then when the plants grow, they get each comfrey plant gets very big. So at the beginning, it's a small hole, and then X amount of months later, you have a big plant that's giving you lots of sheet mulch. Like clover or trefoil is a good idea but you need to, that's by seed, right? You would do that by seed. So if
broadcast.
it's already covered in weeds, how are you gonna?
Well, yeah. So the method for doing that would be like what I've done is, like, for example, I turned an upper section of my garden, and how I went about doing it was I mowed it all down. It had all kinds of stuff. I mean, it had grasses, little mini trees, all kinds of stuff. I mowed it all down. And then I added a layer of compost or horse manure. So and I know for some people based on your location, that's going to be hard to get. Now, the only thing that I'll say that's really nice about that is it gives your seed a little bit to latch onto. That's not, you know, there's no competition for it yet. The weeds haven't, you know, just gobbled it up. So that's what's nice about having that. Even if you have a little bit of soil, it doesn't have to be compost, but something for those seeds. And you could even do straw. Certain seeds will germinate just like that. Wheat seeds will germinate so easily. If you could just sprinkle a little straw, and if your weeds are tall enough, you already got the straw. The hard thing.
Look at the sprouting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you know,
Oh, yeah.
like if somebody does sprouting for eating it, you know, at
Yeah.
home, then there's no like, yeah, there's no soil at all, just water.
Right. Same thing. So the only thing that is like, how does that seed send down its radical, its taproot down into the soil? And that's where you might need to be going through, and, you know, with a shovel, you're picking in and you're prying, or maybe you go with a fork and you're going like this, kind of aerating and breaking that soil up. With hard clay ground, it's hard, but species like daikon radish are great for that. You know, they'll break up that soil like it's their job, and then they decompose. But I think, you know, and I actually never really thought about it in the way that you had thought about it. I think it's a really good idea for species like comfrey. What sometimes can be tricky with that is that they do grow pretty fast, but depending on your soil and the other competition, you know, it might take a little bit for all those to emerge. With a cover crop, I mean, you can get a turnover on buckwheat in 45 days, where you're cutting and chopping and dropping, and then boom, you got a layer of mulch. And you can have another seed broadcasted while that buckwheat is still growing. And so then you got little sprouts, you know, that are barely visible, that when you're cutting your buckwheat, they're already ready to come up. So yeah, soil fertility is huge on Ken's domains. And I think that's something that that's going to be a big topic, I think, in the future for people, because, you know, for Russia, it's a lot of like these marginal lands, you know, it's a lot of like these marginal lands. So like, I don't know, has everybody read all the books? I'm not going to spoil anything. No.
No, you can talk about the book.
Um,
I haven't read all of them all the way through, but you can talk about. I was just going to bring up, and you guys sound like you know way more than I do. We just kind of have been doing whatever we think is right and reading about it, research as we go. But talking about soil fertility is we end up getting ducks. So we have all these ducks and a duck pond, and we have a weed problem. I mean, like you said, we have really fertile soil, but just it's like we're fighting back the jungle constantly. And so if I'm planting something from the top, the way for me to feed it from the top before the bottom stuff grows up and gets it is the water that my ducks swim in and poop in from the pond. And then we just pile that on top, and I, so like I said, I feel like I'm such a novice with what you guys are talking about. I'm learning so much, but animals might be the answer on your property.
Definitely. There is, everybody knows the destruction that chickens can do to one's garden. I actually just had to finish my fence today because they demolished a bed for the third time.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it's definitely, I think animals are very good at that. Pigs actually, and I know a lot of, whether you eat meat or not, some people will have pigs on their place, and pigs will just let a pig go in a little area and he'll dig up your soil. He'll make sure there's no weeds. And that's a good point for sure. I think animals have a place with that. Yeah, with the jungle, I don't know what that climate's like, man. I can't imagine. Here I have there's a certain period in my growing cycle where the weeds are just like they're full force, but every other time of the year, it's just little spots here, little spots here. So that's gonna take some ingenuity for sure. But
You guys, I'm in 3B 4A. I have 3 months where things are green.
Yeah, right. You're like in Siberia practically. Wow. Yeah.
That means really cold weather. Is that cold most of the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's in Minnesota.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, I think there's some pretty good books out there, and I'm sure you guys, if you do a little Google search, you find them all. But there's a lot of really interesting ground covers out there. And comfrey is a low base ground cover, but there's ones that spread fast. Comfrey, the only thing sometimes is depending on the variety, it's not going to spread. So you can definitely find some varieties that if you want them to take over, I mean, I'm not telling you to do it, but like kudzu root or kudzu vine is a huge invasive. But it just takes over. So there's other species there that are going to do that, that aren't going to be so invasive. You still be able to control them, but ground covers, living covers, that's the way to go. Don't spray Roundup. If you get anything, don't spray Roundup. I'm sure none of us are doing that anyway. So, yeah.
It's like I just had the day I was helping a friend move back into her house, and she's walking, and it's a beautiful little river property, and she has maybe about 20 acres there, and she's walking from her house to this river maybe about 100 feet, maybe 200 feet, and it's like, oh, see how like nice it's walking over here. It's because he sprayed it. My man sprayed it all, and I keep walking, and I'm thinking, this is a river, this is all going down, and I couldn't respond with anything, and she's like, yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's all toxic. So I'm like, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Okay.
That stuff's crazy.
That sucks. I had another idea though about your weed issue. Another thing I figured out is that you can one part of the puzzle for me that makes everything a lot more flexible is thinking about like just like focusing on smaller sections at a time. So what you can do is, Wyatt said before, if you just take the weeds that are already there when they're at their biggest and fullest, and you just, without even trying to pull them up or anything, you just, like, I use a machete and it just takes a minute, like just hack them down, right? And then you've got all that biomass. But that biomass is only as much biomass as there, right? That's the problem I'm always running into, is like, I've got some biomass on there, but it's not usually enough to do the scale of mulching I want to do. So the answer is like mulch in a smaller area, take a biomass from a big area, harvest all that biomass,
Yeah.
pile all that biomass into a smaller area. And then at least that year, you know, if you take all that biomass and pile it into a small enough pile, it's going to end up being thick enough to really kill all the weeds in that one pile, even if that doesn't cover the whole area. So if you have a field, harvest all the weeds from the entire field and then pile them up in like 20% of the field.
And it's
then
important. It's important to. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I
Yeah.
just, when you said harvest the weeds, I wanted to just make sure that people understood. Like, it's very important. Don't harvest the weeds after it's set seed, because then you're gonna have weeds next year. So
all those it's not even when you have to. I have some of the weeds I have in there. One of them, I think it's called like Asian dayflower or something like that. It's
yeah.
not stolons. It climbs like little vines that creep along things. It's really bad, little blue flowers. But even before that goes to seed, if I pull that and I just drop it on the ground, the roots will just sink right back into the ground wherever I drop it.
Yeah.
So if you're working with something like that, then you could put another step in between, like you get all the biomass and then maybe like do like dunk it in water for 10 days, like something like that, like in a barrel of water, or I don't know, what's another way you can do
Well,
it?
yeah, I was gonna say, to connect this back to my earlier point about the Korean natural farming. And really, I'm surprised, Megan, you haven't heard about this on the mainland. Like, there's a huge organization. They host like parties and stuff. Like, the Korean natural farming is a big deal in Hawaii. There's a school down there. The only school in America is in Hawaii.
Which island, do you know?
I'm not good on my Hawaii islands. I couldn't tell you.
Is that the technical speak I'm not good at, but is it bokashi? Is that like the same thing? That's part of it?
Not, yeah, kind of. They do more like bokashi is kind of it, but that's like just maybe one part of what they do. The biggest thing that they do is make these anaerobic ferments. So they literally get a gallon of stuff and just let it sit for a while. But where I was going with that is, you can make organic pesticides that are totally safe. You can take garlic, you can take onion, and you can let that sit in water. And there's recipes you can go online in this Jadam book. And the link of that is in the chat. Sorry for this. It's a super long link. Sorry for that. But you can go on there and you can find, all of these things are safe enough to drink. Literally. Obviously you don't want to drink a whole bottle, but nothing about it is toxic, but it'll suppress the weeds for sure. So you might be like, in your case, Jim is like taking maybe taking all those weeds out and then going through and doing an application of all that. And then maybe you could tarp. Another big thing is solarizing. I don't know if anybody's ever solarized. Works great. Let it sit on there. If it's really thick stuff, just let it sit on there longer than you think. And you can peek under the tarp every day and check it out, see what it looks like. But solarizing is really effective. It's not great for the microbes, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do when you're in a prairie or a wooded forest and you're converting it into garden. So,
No, I kind of want to address Chana. Is it Chana's comment? Is it? I'm not sure if it's a male or a female. I'm gonna assume it's a female.
I'm not sure. Chana only can communicate. She's a female.
Yeah, female. Okay, so Chana, you made some comments about making friends with weeds, and I cannot express how much I've tried. I've eaten quickweed, quackweed, any kind of weed I can, and I've tried to make friends and make use of all of it. But if you like my goal is to be able to feed my family with the things that I grow, and I've failed at that, like, I don't know, like crazy dramatically. And the reason is tomatoes are much more gentler plants than hay. And hay just takes over. And as we try to grow things, then like this year I had no time for garden at all. I spent like, I don't know, maybe a few days planting it in the spring, and then the frost came, froze my tomatoes, froze my cucumbers, even though it was 2 weeks past the average frost day. And I kind of given up on it from that point on. And then in the middle of the summer, I come in there, and among the weeds, there grows the cauliflower and the Brussels sprouts and the turnips. And I'm like, I'm coming out of this place. And I'm like, Adam, my husband is Adam. Like, I'm developing a new method of growing where it's just like, where you don't worry about the weeds. You just, yeah. Like I said,
I don't worry about the weeds. I really don't. There's read the books and, feel your heart out, go look in the woods, like everything. Actually, when there's competition, like certain commercial growers introduce competition on purpose, because when you get competition, you get higher yields. So it's kind of like, where does this, there's a quote on one of the tea bags I drink sometimes, and it's the difference between a weed and a flower is a judgment, and so what we think of a weed, maybe we should just try to flip our attitude and think like, you're growing here and I didn't ask you to grow here, but maybe you do serve a purpose, maybe you're protecting something, maybe it's a hard battle for sure. I wondered, did Chana have anything? She didn't have anything to say on that. She brought up one other point that I want to mention. Are leaves good for mixing into the soil? Yes, the best. Anastasia talks about that as well, and it makes total sense when you think about it. It's deciduous trees on your property are probably the biggest resource you have if they're by a garden. They are the biggest thing. How much pounds and leaf matter they'll drop, and they're perfect for your climate. They're adapted to the climate. There's a whole lot of other cosmological things we could talk about, how they've absorbed all the rays and they're full of life. And, but really for the vegetable garden, a tree, for example, oak, they're slightly more acidic. They're perfect. A lot of us here in the Midwest, we have oaks all around. I don't know. You guys all have different trees. We're all spread out. She's got jungle trees, you probably got deciduous or conifers mostly, right? Evergreens. That's what most of your forest is. Yeah. Right. Or no? Oaks, man.
Yeah, we have mixed. Yeah, the conifers, they start a little bit later, a little more north than us.
Oh, okay. I know there's a lot of pines up there and things.
Yeah. North.
Yeah, it's I think that's the biggest hurdle for people, is trying to think about, how am I gonna plant all this stuff and how is it not just gonna get taken over by the wild? And that's something, permaculture looks to work with that, work with succession. That's what that process is. Those weeds are succession. Everything wants to go back to a forest, even a desert. It just takes a long time. And in Megan's case, it takes a really short time, 15 years, and it's going to be a jungle with trees. Right. She could clear cut that hillside behind her in 10 years. Right.
Recently.
Right. And look at it. Right. So, where if someone was in Siberia or something like that, or in Arizona, it's going to be a totally different process. So, if you guys aren't interested, if you guys aren't familiar with the concept of forest gardening, which I think Jim is, that sounds like what Jim's doing. And a lot of us are just trying to raise some veggies in a raised bed, or, on the ground. But forest gardening is really something worthwhile to look into for sustainability. And Chana said, can we please talk about planting fairies with her? I'm not sure. Planting the plants with their spit. I'm not sure if that's what she means.
Anastasia method, where you germinate it.
Oh, with their
Oh,
spirit.
in your mouth. You have to hold it in your mouth and then you plant it.
Yeah.
He's talking. I was just gonna say, this is just side mention, and when you were mentioning what sprouted out, the cauliflower and everything, I mean, you just received a message like, this is what I want to grow. I'm going to feed you. Here it is. You are giving so much that I think that it's trying to give back to you. Like I keep hearing you say, I'm trying this, I'm trying that. And like I said, I'm not, we have some things growing, but not that many things. But I just, as I was listening to you talk and watching your daughters, you've given so much. The land talked to you and said, here it is. you are eating cauliflower this year,
Right, right.
There's something to
I
that.
know. And and it's interesting you bring this up because like you live in tropical jungle. I live in Minnesota jungle because like the forest is taking over, and
Right.
we had to, yeah. And remember that story about garlic? Remember I think it was the parable about who is the richest fiance. I don't know how to
Oh, I don't
translate.
know that I've heard that one. No.
I don't know either.
Okay,
Oh, which
tell me.
book was it? Somewhere, yeah, okay. So basically there's a woman, there was three parables and so one of the parables, which fiance is the richest? And so then there's this,
I remember. Yeah.
do you remember that one?
I think I'm recalling it as you're saying.
Yeah,
So
Benefit.
yeah, so the one of the fiance was a entrepreneur and a businessman. He knew, he was like, I'm gonna plant this year I'm gonna plant all the garlic because garlic is gonna go for it. And then next year I'm gonna plant everything else. And then there was another guy, another fiance, and he, instead of doing anything with his land, he just took over what his dad did, and he just didn't really do much. He was just kind of do, instead. And this guy with the garlic, he sold all his garlic, he got a fancy car, fancy house, and this guy was still riding the same horse that his dad had. And then
yeah,
the woman was deciding which one is the richest, and the one with the garlic would have to constantly invest and never has enough time for anything, versus this guy, every plant knows him, produces for him, and the horse, knows where to take him without any whatever. So it's the story was about what's priority, right? What's better, what's worse, whatever. But when I brought it up about garlic, I got your message. I think I got your message. I need to, and it kind of goes along with the permaculture, right? It's, each environment kind of is suited for something. And obviously mine would be for cruciferous, because they do prefer cold. I saw that in a comment. But like, you kind of want to feed your kids with a watermelon, and there's no way they're gonna fight the hay with it, right?
right.
So
It's hard. I've gone through that because I crave berries. I want to feed my kids berries. We have like almost no berries here, and watermelon's difficult. And I can't grow cruciferous because it's just too wet and humid. It like all kind of gets, what do you call it? I don't know what that's called.
they
Does
go
this
into
make
seed
sense?
too fast, bolting.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, but I've had to change, and when I finally changed and like, but tasting the one that I grew for myself, whatever it is, like we have taro, which is a root. I don't know how to explain that, but you make poi out of it. I had to change what I wanted to, and ate what was here, and it's so much better because it was meant for me to eat it.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you really clear.
And I'm not. This is just my perspective.
No,
when
I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think piggybacking, it's important to think about and ask the land, what should be growing here? You know what I mean? Like
eat oaks and cabbage.
yeah, maybe that's it too, eat your acorn. You can make bread out of the acorn flour, and there you go,
Right.
Yeah. But I think Tom Brown talks about that, in his book. He talks about that, like going to the land and asking and sitting for a minute and like, what do I need to do here? And that's one of the big fundamentals that I like to keep emphasizing in permaculture is like, do less, like sit more, do less, and like observe and think about, if my land's doing this, what can I change about myself to do that? It's like, we're always just like, yeah, I mean, there'd be people that are like, I want berries in Hawaii, so I'm going to have berries in Hawaii one way or another. And I think adaptability is the word I'm looking for. We got to be adaptable for sure.
So pick the place you choose to live wisely.
Yeah, definitely. And it should suit the cuisine you like, for sure.
Yeah.
But
I went through a mourning period before I felt good about it. I went through a year of mourning when I first moved here. I was mourning my old, like, this is what is for me. And then I like totally had this moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm like looking for this thing that I thought was right. And I'm like, my land was just screaming at me. And I'm like, okay, I get it now. All right, I'm listening. Fine.
That's
We're eating
awesome.
taro all the time. We're eating lots of herbs, you know, and whatever. I mean, there's just a couple things. Anyway, I'll stop beating that point, but
No, I think it's
it's
interesting.
funny.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing the Hawaii perspective, because I'm not you know, I think a lot of the world, US is in sort of a temperate. I mean, we, you know, everywhere from Maine, we can kind of grow similar things. California grows a little bit different, but Pacific Northwest, you know, you get an extended season, but you know, you get down into the tropics and things get different down there. So yeah, props to you and respect to you for going on that journey, changing your palate and
Yes.
doing all of that. That's like I
Yes,
haven't
that's
done that.
amazing. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not easy.
no,
You
it's
know,
not.
yeah, Megan, I lived for 9 years in Virginia, which is, I don't know the zone anymore, but um I try to do what you did. I try to, and then I mean the weather, you know, having 70-degree weather in January is crazy. It's not always like that, but it happens, you know. Versus what I grew up is basically Minnesota. So what did I do? I moved to Minnesota because I could not do what you did.
It's all, you know, my mother-in-law told, well, I don't know. I grew up in dry, like Southern California is desert climate. And so I had, and just anything you wanted to grow grows there if you uh, cultivate it, I suppose. It takes some work, but you can grow all the strawberries. So berries and pitted fruit and all those things are like what I wanted. But moving here, for me, everybody, see, that's the cool thing. Everyone's got their different thing. I was like, okay, I'm here. I'm on an island. I'm away from my family, you know, and certain ways. But then I like, you know what it was? Actually, that turned for me was I learned hula, which was, you know, the dance of the culture in Hawaii. So I could dance it at our wedding. And my palate changed after that when I could appreciate why things were done the way they were. Then I could go, wow, you know, this is the story behind the taro and the poi and the mango and the whatever. But I just kind of clicked in my head that culturally, and you're already connected to your land if you grew up there, you know, that was the change for me, I suppose, where I didn't feel sad about it anymore. I felt like I was gaining something. But anyway, I feel like I'm babbling.
No,
I don't
not at
need to go
all.
on these
I'm like glued.
tangents.
I'm glued, and I'm thinking about like, oh my, like what would it be feel like to go through that change, like that radical change where your taste, your culture, everything is just like shifted. I mean, I've moved across the country, but I've never moved different zones, different foods. I'm fascinated by that. And in fact, you make me want to go like travel abroad to some crazy country. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let's see what's on. Yeah, we're at about 7:55 my time, 8:55, or I don't know what Hawaii time is. But yeah, is there any other pressing questions that anybody has that, you know, they want to, so they can sleep well tonight? You know, is there anything, I mean, this is an open platform, you know, I just would like it to be, I found myself going to the community connection calls and feeling like this is really cool, but I'm into the growing, I'm into the plants, and I wanted to have community that had the Anastasia kind of philosophy, but was willing to talk about that plant knowledge, you know, and talk about how are we going to build our domains. I mean, like the more people that we can get talking about that now, you know, the more our idea is going to be filled, and, you know, we'll have a vision, we'll have a collective vision, and then it'll differ individually, you know. So that's my vision, but I really want to make it so like everybody can kind of do what they want to do.
Has anybody built a living fence and had success? Because I'm in the Midwest and we have a lot of deer and groundhogs.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Where are you at, Joel?
Lansing or Michigan, mid-Michigan.
Oh, close.
Where are you at, Wyatt?
I'm in Missouri. I'm in an hour outside of St. Louis.
Okay.
So I'm in the heart of the continental, but and then Nadia's up in Minnesota. So
Yeah. Joel, with the deer, like with our berry patch and fruit trees, we had to put up the fence. Like
Right.
we tried different things and that was, and
Right.
that's the answer. I think.
I mean,
Well,
I have a little fence up front. I have a lot of shade. And then last year I was gone and the deer jumped the little fence, cleaned out the tomatoes. I was so mad. Now I have like a mesh thing around on cane poles higher. But one of my friends from northern lower Michigan gave me this little cantaloupe. It's the best one I had all year. But she grew it. She said it's not very big, but it was so good.
Oh,
I mean, if she had a hoop house, she could do better.
right.
Just, she's
Yeah.
tried sweet potatoes without luck,
Right. I know for the deer, I just want to mention before I forget, try raspberries. Try,
They eat
try-
those too.
yeah.
They've eaten
try-
my raspberry plants.
but, oh, really? They eat the thorny ones?
Yeah, they have thinned them down. Yeah, like in the winter or spring, they'll start trimming them because they're hungry.
All right. I see. This is a serious problem. Okay.
You don't have as many deer in Missouri.
Well, oh no, you have no idea. We, in fact, we're one of the most populated states with deer. There's, unfortunately, roadkill on the road very often. It's,
And we have that, and the township's gonna have some harvesting, so there's less
yeah.
roadkills.
oh yeah, we have,
Yeah.
or hunting is almost mandated to keep the population down. So,
Well, if they took the wolves and they took whatever,
right. They take the bear out, they take the wolves out, and they're like, why is the deer all crazy all of a sudden?
Yeah.
It's pretty simple. Yeah, I think the solution though is trees, and so you'd have to help those babies along while those deer are there, and maybe a fence is the solution. But I know like honey locust will grow in the Midwest temperate zone, and that has thorns on it that will pop a tractor tire. So
Okay.
a dense planting of those with then, a forest garden should go like, tall, medium, it scales down, and you can
Right.
even do it on both sides, and
Oh,
yeah, you don't have to just do it on one side. You can, if this is your south slope, maybe, you're gonna plant your heavily fruiting stuff if you have an edible one, but then maybe on your other one, you plant some hardier stuff. And if you can get like stacked layers, especially with like raspberry, and then maybe, I think Chana, did she just say hawthorn? That's a good idea. Yeah, hawthorns, things like that.
yeah.
And just layer that up. They can't get through that. I mean, multiple.
When I lived outside of town, what I did for a garden, the deer didn't come because we mowed a lot, but
Yeah.
I kind of mounded up the dirt, and then between the rows, I'd put down cardboard and then straw.
Yeah.
And so it was like these layers, and that helped the weeds in between. And then now usually I help some friends once a week or whatever for, 3-4 hours. They're market gardeners. So I'll go
Okay.
out there and weed, but and I just barter. So I'll get food from them, if people want experience.
Yeah, and I just want to mention one more species. Chana is it seems to be a very good expert about some of these rowans too. Rowans are a good species to maybe include in there. And
So for a living fence, Rowan,
yeah, and I actually am going to look that up right now because I do not know a whole bunch about rowans.
and what were the other ones? I'm sorry.
A hawthorn, raspberry, the honey locust tree or the locust trees would be really good.
my
There's
gosh, if Rowan is mountain ash, my deer, we've planted 25 of them. None of them survived the deer.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, mountain ash, right? Yeah, southern Tibet. It looks like kind of like sea buckthorn. Looks a little bit like that. Yeah, it's hard.
I don't know.
It's hard with those deer.
I think the goal is to have a fence, because eventually I'll move from where I am now. Have a fence and then have something to grow around it. And then eventually the fence can go.
I have had success, and you guys can call me crazy, but I have had success asking the animals to leave stuff alone. And I mean, multiple times. I had a groundhog and gopher problem really bad, and when I lived in Oregon, and I sat in my garden one evening and I told those gophers, if they were listening, I said, listen, I'm really trying to eat some good food here, and I'm really trying to nourish my body and my mind and my soul. And you're robbing me of this. Now I know you're hungry too, but please just leave a little bit, leave enough for me. And so I always am in my mind, I'm like, you know what? There's a rabbit that I'm friends with that's in my garden now. It's so tame, guys. I can walk right up to it. It's the coolest thing. And I just tell it, I see it eating my Swiss chard. And I'm like, oh, I'm so happy you're enjoying. I got plenty, if I had 20 of those, it'd be different. But, I think let's make friends with the animals, but the deer, we've created a situation in our country where it's like overpopulation because we're messing up.
There's a lot of bunnies around by me. Yeah. Bunnies and squirrels and everything. So
yeah, well, the squirrels ate all my pears this year, so cool. Yeah, I mean they did. I had a pear tree full of pears and they ate them all. I'd see them. I'd sit there and watch them. They go up, they grab a pear, and then they scurry off and like run. I don't know. Ellen said, I haven't tried it, but I've heard blending a fresh egg with water and spraying it can keep the deer away. Interesting. I have never heard of that. That is interesting. A fresh egg with water. I wonder if they can't stand that smell, but I think, yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the talking, I feel like I've tried that, and I know I have because my dog eats animals, and so I try to tell everybody to stay away. But then there's the hunting season comes, and then I tell the opposite. You just come in here. Nobody touches you here. Right. But we have to come back to that. We have to come back to the heart, right? I get it. So thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, I mean it's really, you're reading Tom Brown now, and like I just actually picked up his book last night. I could not sleep last night. I was so inspired. I have no idea why. I literally probably got like an hour of sleep. I just was like awake thinking and was reading some of his book, and I think the more we can communicate with the land. He did the fire experiment. You guys know what that's like, where somebody was gratefully placing the logs and gratefully, sculpting it and lighting and, saying like everything was thank you. And then another fire that just kind of set up and lit. Like there's noticeable photographic differences that they took pictures of. I mean, the one fire burns without smoke. It burns bright. It burns straight. The other fire kind of burns all like weird and decrepit and like, burst out and whatever. And it's like, on our own land, we have that opportunity too, I think, to really communicate. And that's what, yes, Chana, thank you. Dr. Emoto's, those rice and water studies. That's such a good point to bring in. Our thoughts definitely affect all these processes. The seed planting with Anastasia, the soaking your feet in nettle, or salt brush, all of these different things that get your energy into the place so it knows you. And when it knows you, I don't think it'll treat you like a foreigner. But it's hard, especially when we're in wild areas. Like you're on the edge of a forest, right, Nadia? Yeah, I mean, that's hard. That's like you're getting into a big community there, and they're saying, do we like this or do we not? Are we going to eat all of our plants this year, or are we going to leave them?
So when we talk about these things and talking, working from the heart, I asked myself, okay, so this is what I want. I want to be able to sit in the winter, to sit by my, in my couch and look out this window, because we placed the house so we could see the sunset and the sunrise out of these windows. And I want this to look far away. And so we planted 1,200 trees on the north side. We have a garden and the already established forest on the south side. And we wanted but it's being taken over. And then I asked this question, right? Like, I want this, but it's not happening. Like I'm fighting then, and so then I have to change what I want. But aren't I the one who decides what I want? And shouldn't I be able to command? But then do I know enough to command? It's just like
yeah, no, I know what you mean. Well, it's like one of those things where you're so certain on one thing that's like a definite of your land, or a definite like, hey, I have to go this way. And if I don't go this way, then my project isn't going to succeed. And that's just not the case. There's 10,000 ways to achieve the same goal. You can always find something new. There might be principles that are the same, but there's always a new way to do it. And I think like, I found in my own self, like, I got to layer my beds like this, and I'm going to plant in this way. Like just the other day while I was planting, I'm thinking, why do I kind of plant still in rows? I could do these cool little circular patterns. I could do this. I could do, you know, like, I think being open to that willingness for your own creativity to express itself more, like, you know, like get rid of the framework and the structure and just, but it's hard because, like, you know, tree planting requires knowledge for sure. Like, by no means am I an expert at it, you know, like certain trees, just like there's certain times of the year, you know, certain trees are super resilient more than others. Other trees, you plant them and you wish you wouldn't have planted them because now they took over. So it's hard. It's hard. It's like, you know, we're deprived of that knowledge, you know, being born in these urban environments, you know. So I think the work we're doing here is powerful work, guys. Even just thinking about this stuff is powerful for us to try to understand those processes. And yeah, it inspires me for sure. I think we, you know, every time I think about, you know, planning my domain or things like that, I'm just like inspired to pick up another book on forest gardening or anything like that, because it's like, okay, what more do I need to learn? What more? I want this to be perfect. So, you know, let me like really find the plants that are going to work the best. And, you know, it's an ongoing learning thing. We never stop learning. But
I think it's nice to have some other interaction beside so much news that I don't listen to much, but people send me stuff. It's like there's a lot of news negativity that I could pass on.
For sure.
yeah,
If
Drama.
anybody wants to know, like the super tree that grows like crazy and spreads like crazy, you cannot stop it, plant some ash. Like, my God.
really? Ash is dying here from emerald ash borer. All of our ashes are all dying.
Oh my gosh, our ash is like bamboo. Like, it does not die, and it's literally like one on top of the other, on top of the other.
That's
That's
why
so
we have Bradford pears. That's how our Bradford pears are here. They grow everywhere. Yeah. No, yeah, there's stuff like that. I just want to read this comment that Ellen said to everyone. I'm sure you guys could all read it, but I think it's good to say. She's not into rows anymore. Nothing in nature grows in straight lines. If we observe nature and mimic, we have better results. And telepathy is definitely where we are headed to live, in cooperation with all beings and one another. I think, I mean, you read some of the stories that Anastasia talks about in these books. That's where we got to go. I mean, we gotta be in that space with those living beings. And I think the like not having straight rows is definitely, I don't plant carrots in straight rows. I broadcast, you know, sometimes for demonstration or like ease of use, or if I'm incorporating a lot of species, yeah. But a lot of times it's fun just to scatter, make a painting or something, you know. I don't know. Yeah, good point. I appreciate all your points, Ellen. Thank you. I think we all do. It's really nice to have people to jive with, and I hope this group grows, you know, to where we're able to have people who really know about, you know, certain things. Like, you know, we didn't touch on natural building or, you know, any house design, but that's something a lot of people are interested and they're thinking about, and it's stressful for them to think like, well, I want to have this sustainable house and live this lifestyle, but how do I do that? And I don't even know how to frame anything. And, you know, so I think it'll be cool to get members in and to bring people like that in. But you know, and anybody's free to go too. I'm sure you guys all know that, but we're a little bit over, you know, most of our other calls all go over. We just set a guideline, but yeah.
I do have to go. I just wanted to say thank you. Personally, I'm still finishing my work day. It's the middle of the day here. It's 3. So, but I just so crave this for my soul to connect with you guys. You know, it's funny, I'm not an online person, but I'm finding myself checking social media every day because I love this group, and just, you know, because it's positive and it's forward thinking and it's connection and all things that I know in my heart is right. And we're surrounded in the world by so much division. You know, I appreciate the unity and the connection with you guys. And I'm have to go file taxes, which is really bizarre. Totally opposite.
It's okay. But yeah, thank you, Maggie, for joining.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Yeah. I think we're in for a treat as we keep going on. And I think the there's a lot of really cool things happening with the foundation soon. I feel the same way as Megan. I could care less about a phone, about social media, about all of it. To me, the more and more you go into the plant world, all you can't help but think is like, this is a distraction. Nothing natural communicates in this way. Everything communicates through thought and through feeling primordially, like that's its primary force. So it's like, I'm doing all this analytical work and, I need to send this message and send this email. But things like this, it's like that thing that Anastasia talks about, like using the forces of darkness for good. And I think that's what the Ring Cedars is doing, the group here. I know there's a lot of really exciting stuff coming with the foundation soon that Gabriel's going to be releasing. Really cool for us all to be able to connect with. I know that it's going to be a for real nonprofit soon. There's going to be land that will be starting to accumulate for us to use. Even if it's just for a meeting place. I think he wants to have a reading gathering 2022. So yeah, I'm just super grateful to have a chat with all you guys, because this is, we're not able to be in person yet. We're not able to telepathically travel there. This is what we got. This is what we're working with. And so I'm grateful for this, because it's like we're all, we'll go to bed and we'll think more about the plants tonight, and then we'll think about our design, and I'm probably the youngest one here, so I got a little bit more like I'm just keep grappling, and I think the best thing for anyone who's feeling like they got to learn all this right now is you got all the time in the world, just soak it up, and you're never going to reach that perfect, what you're doing now is perfect. Your little garden out back is perfect, your weeds are perfect. Just let them be. Ellen said something in the chat. Calling the own streamer, but I think people can join us. Oh, really? So to get in, need to have an invite linked into an email. I did not know that. Ellen just sent this message to me. Did anybody have any trouble joining this? No.
No,
You
but
had
I
trouble?
have an account already with Zoom. Maybe that's.
Did you have trouble, Ellen? No.
I needed to sign in with an email account linked to where I was trying to sign in with an email account that wasn't where the invitation was sent. So it made me use the other one. And I don't know if anyone else had that issue. But if somebody didn't have weren't signed up for the Anastasia emails, I'm not sure that they would have been able to get in.
Gabriel sent one out, but yeah, I'm not sure how that would work. And I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm new to this whole meeting thing. I just had to upgrade my Zoom things where I can host meetings for as long as I want. So there might be a setting in there that I need to change that allows people to I thought I clicked that you don't have to have a Zoom account, you can just log in, but I'll check that out. Yeah, and if you guys have any, I'm on Facebook. If you guys have any requests that you want to talk about for sure, or things that you want to see happen in this group, please feel free to reach out, make the change. Let's do it.
Wyatt, maybe at some point, and I think that's kind of a loaded thing, but at some point maybe we could touch on planting a forest that would be reading that life book. The book of creation. Creation.
Yeah.
I was just reading that section again, and it's just like
when Vladimir is talking to his son, and his son, point. I really
for thousands of years, right? So they kept it on originally for thousands of years.
I don't know.
Was that the part with the alphabet? Like you can
yes.
read. Yeah, it's really exciting. I haven't seen that anywhere else mentioned, like that you can read the forest like an alphabet.
I don't think when I first read it, I don't think I understood what was meant by that. But I think what that means is their people, their family are the original people from the creation, right? Because that if they preserve the forest for thousands of years unchanged, right? Wouldn't that mean that
Yeah, but I mean, if you remember her lineage goes back to I'm missing her name, it starts with an L. And when, you know, there was the mother, it was when mankind was already starting to fall into this.
Lubamila?
What was it?
Lubamila?
No, that's Vladimir's wife. No, it's the one before that. It's a Jewish name for a goddess as well. And I can probably find it really fast, but it's basically this woman had a child that she thought was deformed, and she
Right,
threw,
I remember that. Yeah.
yeah,
She
she
just
threw,
dropped them there. Yeah.
right, and like heaven and God, you know, were just like, and allowed a drop of dew to fall under her lips.
Right. But that means, yeah, would that happen when people were already not like super bright?
Right. So I guess that for me, that's like, I don't think that was I don't feel like, you know, Adam and Eve, if we want to refer to them in that name, you know, they drifted. You know, it talks about how Adam broke the branch off of the tree and he was trying to investigate. I mean, I don't think there's been this like idyllic preserved person, you know, we're all human. But I think, and I maybe, are you suggesting that they planted the forest, that they planted the plant?
No, I think, well, she said that they've preserved, well, that's what they've, like, her family has preserved the forest in its original state for thousands of years. Those were the words. And so maybe even though that woman who threw her child with a broken leg into the ground and ran away, maybe even though that tribe already existed and they were not the pristine people, I don't know how else to
Right.
refer to them.
Right.
Maybe they just didn't cut the forest out. Maybe it was still kind of in pristine way from the creation. Maybe it wasn't far enough away. I don't know.
Yeah.
How else would it be?
I don't know.
I would
Okay.
I would think if we're in tune, somehow we would learn to read trees.
Yeah.
And I don't think it has to be sustained by anybody for a long time or something, you know.
Yeah, I think it exists there. I mean, trees like already try to speak to you. I mean, I have an oak tree out by where I sleep, and it's a very big oak tree, and you know, I'm always really drawn to that. And every night before I go to bed, I go up and I hug this oak tree, and the tree teaches me how to communicate with it. That's the craziest thing. I mean, I've learned it's, you know, whether you think trees have gender or not, I know that this tree is a more feminine energy, you know, and the tree teaches me how to communicate by listening through my feelings. And there's days when I'm just not there. I'm like so in my head, and it's like, it's always just there. But it, like, the other day, I just was able to drop right in, and a poem came to my head, and it was this tree telling me about how the wind blew through its leaf. So I think that like tying that back to what you're saying, Nadia, is that like, I don't know that necessarily, I don't believe that I think there's sacred spaces on the planet, but I think that every space is also sacred, and every space holds within it the secrets that we're looking for, or that book. Of course, maybe not a city block where there's a patch of grass and a single echinacea plant or something like a coneflower, but I think in a forest, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is, there's certain varieties and the relationship between the plants, that the proportions, that's important, but maybe it really is just more of a tuning in thing and being able to like see, you know.
And see, that was my original, that's why my original understanding, that once we are connected, you know, through our blood, we are able to read we're able to connect to the divine. And it's my true, you know, I understand that. But when I was reading the section, it was actually by accident. I was looking for something completely different. And then the way he says it, and I have to come back to it just to confirm, but that time when I read it, it was actually specific trees were placed in specific, you know, whatever from each other. And that was preserved through thousands of years to read into in that divine language that would also translate the same way into any language.
Right.
And which also made me think how ridiculous that biblical story is, or maybe it's not ridiculous, but maybe it's the truth. You know how they they built that tower because people wanted to talk to God, so they built it, And so God got mad and decided, well, you know, you can't do that. And I don't know, something like, I'm going to make you speak different languages so you can't understand and you cannot finish building this tower. Well, this book says completely opposite. The language is always the same, right? And it's us who, you know, don't understand it anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's going to take like all of our collective thought to try to fathom that. And maybe that's something that we can continue to touch on in these, you know, meetings and revisit, because it's an area I've never brought my thought to. You know, I've never thought about, I assumed it was just this, you know, like we were saying, like this, you know, understanding in your heart. But if it was this other pristine planting, you know, or a divine language that's preserved in something, that's somewhere I haven't been, and I'd like to explore that more for sure, that idea more.
I'll find that section. I'll post it in the comments for this meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like it starts with an L, her ancestor's name. It's like on the tip of my tongue. Yeah. Thank you, Joel, for coming. Joel, bye-bye. Yeah, it's so much, like, it's, you know, that I'd said in the beginning, like, this is about taking philosophy and turning it into practicality, but there is a point where practicality like meets philosophy again, and it ties back into it, you know, and it's actually never separate from it. And I think that's the thing with like modern gardening and things like that, is we're trying to find these you know, new methods all the time. And it's like sometimes the new methods are the oldest methods, you know, the oldest ways of communication, the oldest ways of like growing plants. And a lot of that's been hidden from us for sure, from commercial agriculture and, you know, the modern lifestyle. Yeah, Nadia, you got my brain going on that divine planting. I'm gonna be thinking about that now.
Anastasia also says that, like, originally we weren't supposed to have so much concern over food, that, you know,
Yeah.
we had nutrients from the pollen in the air, and we would go pick some berries, or seasonally, you know, it's like part of the foraging aspect of that too. To simplify again, like the ease with which we allow ourselves to be supported, because we are, like every other species, is naturally supported by nature's intelligence. And we've just separated ourselves out so far from it that we think we have to conquer and control nature, when really there's this language that wants to be expressed and shared by us. And as she also says, that every species has a gift for humanity and for man, and it's our job to listen and figure out what that is. And so, you know, when we think of the weeds, sometimes there are, you know, like we talked about succession, the ones that grow really, really deep roots that seem hard to get out, like bindweed here, can grow 80 feet, but they're also making the water more available for water to percolate down deeper. And so when the soil health is strong enough, they don't grow there anymore, because it naturally goes into something, it goes to the more disturbed areas to grow there. And then when there's enough earthworms and the soil, you know, chemistry is better, then those species can take over that are naturally suited for that. So I think if we tune in more and realize, like, everything has a gift for us, rather than fighting it and trying to control it from our limited perspective of how nature works, we can draw on the philosophy, is also the practicality, as you said, Wyatt, and it's simpler. I just know, after studying for so long and researching and trying so many methods, it's already natural. We've kind of overcomplicated it with our minds, but when we tune back into our hearts, the answers will come. And I'm really excited for the next 10 years of new inspiration, that people are just, we're working alongside and with nature instead of in opposition to it. It's going to be pretty amazing.
You hit the nail on the head with all of that. That's very wise. That's saying stuff that, you know, a lot of times your mind's distracted with all the other details. That stuff is so important, you know, that the ethers fed us, you know, in the very beginning, and all of that. and that, you know, food is something that, you know, it's something else. I keep mentioning Tom Brown, but, you know, he said he ate when he was hungry, and that was all. You know, there's no, I was just reading the other day the story about how a man walks in the morning in his domain and picks a berry, and it's ready for him. Why does he pick 3 currant berries, and why 3 on that day at that hour, that minute? You know, because he needed those 3 berries, but he just picked the berries, and he didn't have a second thought about them. You know, maybe he was admiring them and then picked them. But I think, like, yeah, that sort of consciousness, that energy, it's not one that I'm at, or I don't know that we don't have a lifestyle conducive to that. But I think, like, that's the beauty of going back and listening to your heart, you know, like you're saying, is like we're able to tap into that visualization as well of what does that lifestyle look like, and what is that planting, you know. And really a lot of it's describing a forest type ecosystem in your yard. You know, grandfather mentions in the book, you know, imagine a place where there's over 300 fruiting species. I mean, I tried to write down a list, I got to like 35, 36 fruiting species. Like, I mean, and I had thought I included ones that were hard to know, you know, dewberry and things, you know, that I have no, you know, there's some really far out ones, but it's like, there's, like you say, there's a species out there for every one of us. And she mentions too about defining the purpose. It's up to us sometimes to define. I had a moment with, I have a bunch of okra plants, and I had a moment with them where, you know, I eat the majority from my garden, besides grains and things. And I went outside, and I'm looking at my okra plants, and I'm watching them kind of wave, and I think it was nighttime, and I'm thinking, I need to define like what these guys are for, like, because I'm eating them a lot now. It's my main source. There's so many. I have 50 plants, you know, and I like walking by them, and I realized it was like they were, and this sounds crazy, but the thing that popped into my mind immediately was, you know, they're this energy of Saturn, and they're this energy of, for you, they're gonna like help lubricate all of these things and integrate. And like, maybe it was totally made up in my brain, maybe it wasn't. But at that moment, I defined what that okra was going to do for me. And I think it does it. You know, for me, that's what it says, grounding. It's this lubricating. It's a fluidity that happens. And, you know, there's plants I don't do that with. And then there's no special connection there. You eat the fruit and it's just like, tasty, you know. You don't have that, like, plants have this other, when you grow your food, you experience it. They have this other dimension to them where it's like it's feeding something else besides just this. But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling. So definitely. I'm very grateful for you, Ellen, for being on the call, because I'd like to see these conversations go more this way most of the time, and then integrating a little bit more of the science a little bit. You know, how can we, okay, so we want to set up a forest garden pretty much, and what are some things that we can all try to do to allow that to happen? So super grateful for your presence. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah,
And
thank
we'll
you
see
guys.
next time.
Yeah, okay, bye Nadia. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys all coming. I think we'll end the call now. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Ellen. The next call will be next week, same time, same place. Not next week, sorry, a week after, bi-weekly. But I'm on Facebook if anyone feels, you know, if they're into online, want to connect more, share ideas, all about it. All right, guys. Thank you.
You.
Bye-bye.